If you're listening, there's a 100% chance that you have baggage. Your best friend has baggage. Almost everyone you know has baggage. Dr. Christopher Lee takes time to show us how to avoid carrying the baggage of others. His story is the American story, shaped by values, family, hard work, and education. Please sit back and soak up his wisdom because he's giving us free game.
Welcome to another episode of the Somebody's Son podcast, where biting your tongue is never allowed. Young men battle with the pressures of manhood every day. Each episode, we tackle topics that focus on worth, actions, and relationships. Our goal is simple: help men win the war with themselves.
You like the art?
Yeah, it's cool.
So it's funny, like every time somebody comes in here, they always look at the art, and it's really a testament to Chris's wife, T, and him. They own the building, but the art is very intentional in making sure you have Black representation.
Yeah, you know, as a matter of fact, I'll show you a picture today. There's this little kid entrepreneur event that happened in Hampton or whatever.
Okay.
And let me see. And there's this young lady, 13, and she is doing art, and it's amazing.
13-year-old artist.
13-year-old artist, right?
And she's selling
art. I just spent $400.
Wow.
On one piece?
No, it's 3 pieces.
And she's not your daughter.
Awesome.
But, yeah, $100 to $250 per piece. But these are the 3 pieces I bought. You know.
Oh, those are amazing.
And she's not your daughter.
She's not my daughter.
That's impressive.
Those are
13.
amazing.
This is 13-year-old artist.
Oh, that's insane. Whoa,
This is wild. What's her name?
Yeah,
I think it's Jules by JJ.
I see it in the back. Yeah, Jules by JJ.
Yeah, and
that's awesome.
And these aren't her best pieces. These are just
you just
what?
You're trying to get in while you can.
Because the one in the middle, my daughter liked, and I liked the other one, and I said there were 3 similar, and I said I'm just going to get all 3, right? Because I wanted to support her, but they were not my favorite pieces.
Wow.
Right? You know, they just fit with my decor and stuff like that or whatever. But she's tight. I mean, you know, there's one.
That is awesome.
That's wild. And she's 13?
She's 13.
Is she still selling?
Yes.
Did she not sell out is the question.
Whoa. You know, because when I first came in, there's a whole bunch of people around her.
Right.
And so I came back to her last because every time I came by, there were people there. Right. You know, and so, you know, the funny thing is I shared this with a friend of mine, and she said, I wonder it would be a good idea to have kind of a art gallery showing for young artists.
Yeah.
And I was thinking that would be a cool idea, you know? Yeah. So, you know, the art, you know, kind of puts me in that space. It would be cool to find people who would want, you know, African decor, you know, and have a, you know, a little expose for young artists, you know, but 13, I mean, that's a gift.
Man, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's a gift.
That's beautiful.
And to be able to receive support like that early on from folks that are not in her age group, I can only imagine what that does for her esteem, self-confidence. Yeah.
And
but check out her website. She got a little Facebook website, and I went out there, and most of the stuff is out there. It's all original. And I'm like, first of all, I was thinking, you know, the whole business thing. I was thinking, you know, you should have had, you know, a professional photographer take pictures of your thing, and then you sell prints. You know what I'm saying? You can sell the original, but you got to sell the prints too. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, you know. So
The fact that you're supporting her, I think that's very on brand for you. Just because we Chris and I had the luxuries of being able to sit in your classroom. I'll be honest with you, man. Like outside of you and who was it, Dr. Maria Poindexter? There was no other African American professors
in our program.
Oh well, you know, not that that's unique, you know, but I didn't have an African American professor until I was in my doctoral study, and the 2 gents that I sought were not in my curriculum. I took them as electives. So if I hadn't made that effort, I would have went all the way through, never had a Black professor.
Wow. How many times did you have Dr. Lee? I had him 3 times. How many times did you have?
I only had him twice. I had him for leadership.
And strategy.
Leadership and strategy. And I had him for a second one, though. Both of mine, I think you were in the class with me, though.
I think the only one was different was the HRIs.
Yeah, I didn't take them for HR.
Yeah. And I only taught that once, so that was been, just happenstance, whatever. Maybe twice.
Are you cognizant of that when you're teaching? Like, are you cognizant of the fact that there's kids in the classroom that look like you that don't have professors that look like you?
I've never really thought about it too much.
Okay.
And the other way around, white students who may not have had, a
very
black
much
professor.
so, yeah.
Because I don't see the world that way. And one of the reasons I don't see the world that way is because it's baggage, right? And so somewhere around 29, 32 time frame I went through, kind of a, what I call it was a renaissance kind of period where, you kind of learn who you are, right? And one of the things that I said to myself, I would no longer carry other people's baggage, right? So it's actually a whole lot of research that backs that up. And you've heard about it. It's called the Stereotype threat and the Imposter Syndrome and all these other things. But basically what that means to me is that if you are thinking about that stuff, then you're not spending 100% of your mental capacity on what you should be focused on. So imagine you going into a boxing match, any kind of competitive situation, football game, or we've just given a presentation. And instead of being 100% focused on, I need to perform at my best, you got 5, 10, 15, 20, 30% of your mental capacity worried about how people might receive you, how they might perceive you, how they might think about you, how are they judging you, their whole histories, whatever. And you're processing all that. So the research says that you're going to underperform because everybody else who steps into the plate, right? I mean, think about the baseball, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's throwing 100 mile an hour fastball at you. The only thing you should be focused on is that ball. But if you're saying, well, I'm the only black athlete on this team, and how they perceive me, whatever, you're not 100% focused on that fastball. That's how you underperform. So somewhere around, like I said, 29, 32 time frame, I just say, I'm no longer going to carry other people's baggage. And I'm focused on just being me. Yeah. So I'm just going to show up, right? 100% authentic within myself, and as well as the confidence, as well as the flaws. Because I'm fully cognizant that I'm flawed, right? But one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself is being okay with that, right? I'm good at some things. I'm not good at some things. I'm not perfect. I'm gonna make mistakes. I joke a lot of times. Hey, I'm from Alabama. English is my second language, right? And I'm gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna do some things or whatever. But that's who I am. I can't fix that, right? I can try to improve, but I just am who I am. So for me, it's like I'm gonna show up 100% and be focused on being me and the best me I can be, and not worry about what other people think. And then it's a tremendous freedom.
That's just listening to it. I don't practice. I haven't looked at life through that lens again. I haven't lived to 29 yet, to 29 and 32. But that is so unburdening to hear in and of itself, right? Mm-hmm. So essentially what you're saying is by not thinking about that, you can now give 100% into teaching, into
whatever it is you're working on.
That is
breathing.
Insane.
Wow.
Right? Because everybody wants to define you. Just think about all the labels people put on everything, right? And I'm not going to let other people's definition, be the deciding factor. I'm going to let my definition be the deciding factor, right? Because people always say, stuff like, I'm a black man, or I'm a white man, or I'm a woman, or I'm a gay person. I'm like, no, I'm just Chris. I'm just me, right? So whatever that is, I'm not going to let you establish how does it feel to be a black professor or a black person or a black whatever. No, I was a man, I'm a human being, right? So you just start there, then I'm okay with that because I can't change that. Why am I going to focus on that? And I'm not going to let your definition drive me any other direction than what I want to go.
I thoroughly appreciate you sharing this.
Right.
I'm outside of the 32 window. So I clearly, I think I've been able to show up as myself, but I am very much cognizant to how myself is received by the room. And because I know you're an executive at one of the oldest institutions in the country. Even though you have that freedom, has that created challenges for you? Because in those rooms, I'm glad you're not taking on the baggage of others. At the same time, you're not blind. So the people around the room often don't look like you, right?
Absolutely.
So how is that? Has it created new challenges for you? Have you found that it's helped other folks in the majority see folks who look like us differently? Like how is that? Because you have proximity to executives, leaders that most folks just don't have, regardless of what they look like. They just don't have that kind of connectivity.
Yeah, right. Yeah, again, but I just think I am aware of that. But even if I were something different, there would still be some perceptions, good and bad. And here's one of the things I've learned, right? The vast majority of human beings live with a great amount of fear, right? So it's like the imposter syndrome. There are other people in the room who have all the advantages, and they have imposter syndrome as well in some rooms, right? And, the experts will say, if you look at the literature about how things go, that 70% of work opportunities are found through some sort of network, right? 7-0. Look at all kinds of statistics. 70% comes through somebody you knew, somebody who gave a referral, somebody who connected you with an opportunity, told you about something, where 7-0. So if you think about that, then it means that only 30% of opportunities are garnered through merit. But we tell you that 90% is, right? So what I found is, half the people are also feeling imposter syndrome, that somebody's going to find them out also. Think about your job, think about your network, think about it's 70%. But people tell you it's merit.
Why do we do that?
I don't know, but I read an article recently, and it was saying that about how the myth of American meritocracy is, bad or whatever. In Europe, in Britain, as an example, all the noblemen and sirs and whatever, they ain't even pretending the fact that your background and upbringing gives you privilege. They lean into it. Here we say, no, we rejected that. Got rid of the king and queen and all this stuff like that. It's the same. It's the same 10%, 1%. They're all connected some kind of way. I mean, people know people who it ain't merit.
How does this all relate to your unwillingness to claim everyone else's baggage?
Yeah. Okay. So, I'm a knucklehead. I was a Marine, right? And so, when, some people just have whatever it is, I'm just not going to give up. You see what I'm saying? So one, going back to your superpower, right? You got to know you and what you do. And, I'm fortunate to love what I do. So, I work almost every day, but I'm not working, I'm playing because I love what I do. And so I lean into that. So, obviously, I write, there goes a book right there, written 4 books, right? Write a blog, teach, consult or whatever. So I'm doing what I love, right? So I don't have to worry about, some stuff. But part of that work ethic, got from my father or just who I am. So one of my advantages is that, I just work harder than everybody else. Right? So, as a matter of fact, I think it's a guy, Vanderchuck. I think it's Gary Vanderchuck.
Gary V.
Yeah. I was, checking out a little podcast thing he did, and he said that he worked every Saturday in his 20s.
Yep. For his father.
Right? So I thought he was an amazing internet phenomenon. Now, if you work 500 extra days more than anybody else, you might be on top.
Yeah.
Right? You see what I'm saying? So I think that's part of my gift, right? So, I've published 4 books, but I've written like 9. I'm going to get to the other ones, but I ain't got time because I got a full-time job. I got small kids. I'm working, right? But I'm going to get to that, right? Yeah. So that's part of mine, right? So I know the game ain't even, right? I know that I probably miss some opportunities. Some people don't like what I say or what I do, but, I think, most people are positive. Most people are good. Most people are fair, red, white, black, and blue. And you just hang with the right tribe. You hang with the people who are positive, who are nice, and you lead into that. There's always going to be the knuckleheads in any environment, right? And going back to that kind of thing, Denzel quote recently, he goes, have you noticed that all your criticism and hate comes from people who are below you? I was like, wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
But people who haven't accomplished what you've accomplished. It's the haters, right? And it's the same old thing, right? So it's like, I see that person, I know they're a racist. I know they're crazy at whatever they've done stuff. You just try to do your best to avoid them. That's all, right? Because you ain't going to change them. I always say you're not going to walk in one day and be so eloquent, right? Be so amazing that you're going to change that person's whole being. It ain't going to happen. What you have to do is find the people who are loving, kind, supportive, and real, and then you build your own network. I mean, you said in class, once before about the whole board of directors thing, right? Yeah. Somebody shared that with you, right? You got to have your own personal board of directors.
Yes, sir.
So that is the support system, right? And if you create an army of positive people, it's hard to lose, right? Right? You just lean into that, right?
That's
right? Because your opportunities come through other people. Right. Yeah. So I've consulted with 100 colleges or universities or companies around the world. Never advertise. Right?
Oh my goodness.
It comes from going somewhere, doing something positive, and somebody calling you or telling somebody else about you. Right? You heard the saying that says, it's not what you know, it's who you know. He goes, no. He goes, that's backwards. It's not who you know. Who knows you. You feel me? That's your reputation. And I had a colonel, when I was a Marine officer, his name was Colonel Lee. I was a lieutenant. And he said, your reputation is more important than your performance appraisal.
Yeah, so I want to walk down this path.
Let's go.
Whoa. All right, so you published 4 books.
Yep.
One of which is here, Performance Conversations. We'll make sure we plug that in the show notes.
Yep.
I didn't realize that until later, right? So I feel like, and I'm curious to get Chris, because we sat in the same classrooms, right? So 2 different perspectives. I'm curious to see how this goes. But I didn't realize until 27, I was referred.
Yep.
Became the youngest leader at that organization, crushing it. But at 29 is when I started to see how everyone else was able to climb, right? And how does that influence the way we talk about performance? Because we are told that it's a meritocracy. Yep. And it wasn't until then that I stumbled across, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this, about PI. Performance, image, and exposure. And I had to vote up till 29. I crushed performance. And then I realized I wasn't playing in the same stratosphere as everybody else. I started prioritizing image and exposure. And it was like the floodgates open. And I'm like, yo, this is not what they told me, though.
Oh, absolutely.
They told me pull myself up by my bootstraps.
Yes.
So
that's a distraction. Yeah.
Okay.
So I never heard that acronym. That's cool. So thinking about that just goes back to the basic part about human nature. We're all people. People like people. People like people like them. And there's nothing else around that. So I always say work is not about work. It's about people. Right. And so if you think about it, people are going to lean into their own humanity, and people are comfortable with certain people. And what you have to do is remove the barriers.
Say that again?
You have to remove the barriers between people, right? So like yesterday, I did a talk in a class, and I started with a small class, guest lecture kind of thing, like 5 or 6 students. So I said to them, tell me something about you all before we start, right? So I want to know, what year where you're from. One was from Roanoke, right? So I said, hey, I've been to the Roanoke Valley many times. So that means
you and me have familiarity.
Yeah. So I said Roanoke Valley. That means I know where Roanoke is, because that's what they say, the valley, right? You see what I'm saying? So what I was trying to do is build rapport, right? Because otherwise You're just somebody else, another human being, another lecturer, another whatever. And so each of the people I tried to lean into, right? So each of them, two or three of them were government majors. I said, hey, I was a political science undergrad, right? You see what I'm saying? So for each, intentionally, what I was trying to do is lower the barriers between people, because people like them. Simple as that. So you got to figure out how to create a bridge to people, right? It's just rapport.
Let's go.
I think there's a concept that I picked up on earlier when you were speaking that is very different from the way that I know people go about trying to make a change. And what I'm saying is the way that you look at things is typically the things that I see is, hey, you're different from me. Let me point out my differences. And in order for me and you to be in common agreement, you have to acknowledge why I'm different from you. But the best way to go about it is, hey, let's break this down to the physics of it. And the way you and I are common is actually we're human, we're whatever. And then you build up on differences from there, but you find the commonality first. And I think that's because they're used to dealing with people, though, who see the world from... And they're not, when they bring it up, maybe it's because they don't expect you to understand that we're both human.
Right. And I'm saying that's baggage.
Right.
And I'm saying, no, I'm gonna love you and treat you with regard either way. That's the way I live the life, because I just think that's the way it should be. And so if they do that, then I guarantee you black folk do that too. We're like, hey, check this out, man. We know. And I'm like, but that's baggage for me, right? Because it's like, it's self-evident. It's self-evident that, African Americans has been in this country since 1619. And there are people still talking about go home. People whose heritage started in the late 1800s, in the, early 1900s. So why am I going to even acknowledge your ignorance and spend my time trying to dispute that? You see what I'm saying? So for me, it's like, I just show up as, it's a psychological principle called, from undergrad, I'm okay, you're okay, right? In this, I'm not okay, you're okay. If you're not okay with yourself, then you cannot be okay with another. You have to justify and prove and do. It's like, you are complete. You're great. You're all good. You see what I'm saying? And if you feel that, then it's okay to be merciful to other people.
That's
I'm so glad we're having this
I'm so glad we're having this conversation too. And it's making me self-reflect a lot. I feel as though, for me, just on my own insecurities, in the situations, in the rooms that I've been in, I always felt like I stood out. So it's kind of hard for me to ignore the fact that I stand out. And to have that level of just discernment and focus and level of security in who you are. I thought I was very secure in who I was until you got on this couch now. And I got some work to do, but this is good. It's all about the growing process. But I can honestly say, just reflecting on what you're saying, I know that I still need to be more secure in who I am as a black man, and I need to make that more centered around me and being more deep rooted in who I am as a person, and not what you may think of me because of whatever you condition to believe.
Yes.
And I kind of lead with that first, and I have a chip on my shoulder as opposed to leading with who I am. And maybe it doesn't always come out to that way to the other person, but I feel that way.
And it's like, okay, if you have the formal perspective, then you've created an obligation for yourself to educate and re-educate entire humanity. You know what I'm saying, right? So you got extra work to do that other people don't have. But then the irony, you find out that everybody's insecure. Well, not everybody. Almost everybody is insecure, and you can always tell the people who aren't insecure, right? Because they're not apologetic. I mean, they make blunders, they do stuff. They're like, hey, it is what it is. But people who are apologetic, they apologize when they make mistakes. I mean, we're all human. We're going to make mistakes. You see what I'm saying? So, don't add, life is complicated and hard enough as it is. Right?
You said something about you intentionally built rapport with everybody in the classroom by focusing on something you have in common with them.
Yep.
We intentionally are creating a media umbrella called proximity media to do the very same thing. Mm-hmm. Our goal is to create proximity between people.
Yeah.
Because similar to your thought process, so many people have focused on barriers and it's reflective in our content, right? And so how can we help usher in a thought process that is one where people seek to build bridges? And so I'm glad you're sitting next to him.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I needed this.
I'm glad you're sitting next to him because what this now does is it forces us to have the conversation to say, if I'm building rapport with you and I'm comfortable in being Chris, why am I zooming in on the barrier? As opposed to saying, I'm Chris, I'm comfortable in myself. Let me find the bridge. That's what you did. You're sitting there, you're like, look, regardless of what they say, I'm going to find some way to truly connect with them. It's not going to be false. It's not going to be fake, but it is intentional.
Yeah.
And I'm sure by doing that, now those kids are more comfortable in the classroom than they would have been had you not done that, regardless of their background, ethnicity, where they from, where they fell on the planet. When did that realization hit you? Like, when did you realize, okay, because you were in the Marines. My father-in-law, my mother-in-law were in the Marines.
Yep.
Wasn't the easiest career trajectory.
Yeah.
My parents were in the Army. Same difference. So, like, when did that light bulb, I'm sure you couldn't have been like that your whole life.
No, I told you, between about 29, 32, past that Renaissance period when I just kind of gained clarity about who I was and what I wanted, what I didn't want, and all that kind of thing, and then, some of it is fortune as well. But to get to your original part, everybody always feels like they're being judged. Mm-hmm. That's part of it, right? And then the flip side of that is to be merciful. When I was getting married, the lady, the chaplain, she said, the only way you're going to survive is if you have mercy on one another. I'll never forget that, right? And so most of my life is like, saying, you're backwards, you're crazy, you're whatever, and, God bless you. I feel sorry for you because if that's what you believe and you feel and that's the way it's just so wrong. I can't fix that, but God bless you. I'm hopeful, that you get right with yourself and your soul and whatever. So just showing mercy to everybody and hopeful that it give you some mercy too. Because you're going to be just as fallible. Whatever negatives you have, I probably got the equivalent on the other side, right? So that's part of it, the other side of the coin to the judgment. Everybody's judging everybody always. And one of the things that people who are close to me or people, I have good relationships with, long-term relationships with or whatever, I always say that what we have, is we don't judge one another. Right. So like I got two best friends from high school and I can remember talking to somebody, saying, this is my dog. We've been together since we were puppies. Right. Because like one friend is like 42 years. Yeah. Right. And so he's seen every mistake I've ever made. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. But you need somebody to, it's like this lady I used to date like in the 90s. She said something like, if you're ever in a bad room, go try to buy a car because those folks are definitely going to kiss your butt. You know what I'm saying? Like if you need somebody to lift you up, right? You know what I'm saying? So just think about that, man. About you got people in your life, regardless of what happens, they're going to be on your team. Yeah. Right? So then there's no judgment. So if you treat others like that, they give that back to you. Good days, bad days, medium days, doesn't matter. If you don't feel like you're judged and you have to prove something or defend something or do something, you can make a mistake, you're going to be okay. It's back to that psychology. If you're okay, then it's easy to deal with everybody else. But if you're still worried about it, what everybody thinking, what they value, whatever, it's really, really hard, right? So going into different rooms, unfortunately, almost every room I've ever been in my professional life, I am one of only. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And imagine if I had to think about that every single time. Yeah. Right? So I'm like, hey, people going to judge me fair. People going to judge me unfair. Some people totally inflated right? You know, I'd be like, it ain't all that, right? You know what I'm saying, right? It just is what it is. So, just accept it, right? That's Buddha, right? It's about accepting life as it is, not as you want it, right? And so, be merciful to others. Don't judge others. And when you don't judge people, you create lifelong relationships, because sometimes people just want to be connected to you because they can be their full selves. Right? Mm-hmm. Because they know you're not going to, it's not whatever. So like, for example, I had a student within the past couple of years who was clearly not able to work at the graduate level. Not even close. And so I'm like, there's no way you can end up in my class as a capstone course without all these other people just pushing you along, right? And so I'm like, this ain't it. So I'm just saying, just be honest about it, whatever. Mm-hmm. So, but I recognize that. So don't try to make me feel stupid. Like this ain't here, right? Mm-hmm. This is it. But I'm gonna help you. And you can't go out into the world thinking this is good, this is real, and you're gonna represent the university and say, I passed you, right? But you got a long way to go. Now, I'm gonna help you. I'm gonna love you along the way, but I'm a Marine, right? You gotta carry your own pack. You know what I'm saying? You gotta do all this, right? It's a whole lot, because I ain't gonna play the game, because otherwise I'm culpable for your misperception of society and work. And I'm not helping, I'm not doing you any favors, because at some point you're gonna walk out and you ain't gonna be able to do what you need to do, and you're gonna fail. And I don't want to be a part of that failure. What I want to be a part of is your support system. Right? So I'm going to acknowledge the truth and do my part. My job is to be an instructor, a helper. I can easily test you, right? Because, that's easy. People who just want to give you bad grades, that's easy. Right? But your job is not to give people grades. Your job is to instruct them. That's just a byproduct of the way the system is set up. The issue, your goal is to help people. So I'm going to help you, right? And I'm not going to give up unless you give up. And I tell people all the time, babe, if you don't want to do it, just let me know. Because it ain't important to you.
Dr. Lee.
It can't be important to me.
Dr. Lee. I've never wanted a notebook during a podcast so bad in my life than right now.
We can run it back. It's a good thing. We can.
Yeah.
That is the good thing.
I'm going to definitely rewatch this episode like 8 times.
Yes, this is probably one of my favorites.
You said, so I want to unpack a few things.
So much.
I got a question too. You go first. I got a few.
So I'm gonna say all 3 of mine, and you could just take them however you want to take them. The first thing you said is the goal is instruction, not to grade.
Absolutely.
We had a young lady named Toria sit on the couch, and she basically said the same thing, that part of the problem with the school systems or in any academic institutions is that they're focused on the output as opposed to why they are there.
Yeah.
And so I want to get your thought process on, or get your feedback on, how can we ensure that we create a system, or we shift the system where more people think like you and Toria, as opposed to focused on grades. The second thing I want to explore is one of the things you said inside of grad school, and I'll never forget it, and Chris and I have actually talked about this. You said after a person makes $75,000, you remember this?
Yeah. Well, I don't remember that, but that's the research.
The research said that after a person makes $75,000, that over time it becomes less about how much they're being compensated for and what they are doing. I disagreed back then that was even possible.
Yeah.
I'm happy to say I'm wrong.
Yeah, I thought you were stripping too.
I don't think that's the right number due to inflation, but I do agree with you that there comes a point where it's like, okay, this is not fulfilling. What is your thought process around helping people make that shift, right? Because you're like the whisperer for so many executives and business people, particularly not just in the Commonwealth of Virginia, but across the world. How do you help other people get comfortable with making that shift?
Right. Well, try to make a long answer short. So, Aristotle, I still think he's amazing. 4 things he said all people need, right? Be valued as an individual, to belong to a tribe, seeking, pleasure or happiness and meaning, right? And this Maslow's hierarchy kind of intersected in there. Maslow's hierarchy is has those elements. If you take a look at it. So the $75,000 is about the median from around the world, what it takes to not have to worry about subsistence living, right? When you get enough to take care of your just being, food, clothing, shelter, a little safety and security, a vacation or whatever. Then after that, the gains are marginal on how much money you make, that will make you happy. And 140 is another level, that gives you to another level of freedom. And this is all based upon the positive psychology research. It's been replicated all around the world. So the whole discipline of positive psychology. So then it becomes meaning. Why am I here?
Yep.
Will people remember me? Am I making a difference? Is this all for naught? So, first of all, the joke is that, poor people don't write poetry, right? Because when you're trying to eat, it's kind of hard to be eloquent and be thinking about other things, right? So once you get past that point, you get a certain amount of freedom to actually live, which is interesting because, some people would argue that my best friend, we've been talking about this, Rockefeller said, people who work don't have enough time to make money. Think about that. So
That's a big bar.
Yeah. So the point is that if we're all here living on this rat race of this subsistence kind of living, we really don't have the freedom to think and enjoy and be, right? So that's why the Buddhas and the Socrates and all those people, the Aristotle, those are people who had resources or they didn't want resources, right? They were freedom from the distractions of making a living and trying to live. Two totally different. So it's about meaning. Right. So you're at that point in life. Okay, I got to the point where I've made enough that I don't have to worry about survival.
Yeah.
So then you start saying, okay, what else is there? Right. You know what I'm saying? That's typical, kind of thing at a certain economic point and a certain age. Right. Yeah. So it's evolution. You get there, you're like, okay, so I'm here. Wow. I mean, my best friend reminded me recently that my goal coming from where I came from was to make $500 a week. That's where I started. I thought if I could make $500 a week.
You're good.
Oh, good. You feel me? Right. So the point is, but if you're living a working class family, right?
Yeah.
When the community college system came up with an acronym called Goodwill came up with an acronym called ALICE, Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. Working poor, right? You don't have anything, but you got a job and you're working. If you're in that environment, you don't got time to write poetry and think about, pontificate about life and, what's important and whatever. And you're trying to figure out how we're going to make sure that, COVID doesn't ruin the family finances and I got to pay rent or whatever. So that's what it's all about. So what you're going through is natural. And then this is where you make a real difference because you got time to think about and help other people. Right? So I'm assuming the podcast is about that. You got to a point to say, okay, this is kind of good, but the playing field around me ain't level. And there's some other people who can benefit from some of the things I've learned. So how can I give back? How can I contribute? What can I do or whatever, right? To get the word out.
Dr. Lee, do you want to join the podcast?
No doubt.
We haven't sat in his classroom since 2013.
Still dropping gems.
And he's still dropping gems. That's exactly where we are.
There are things that you told us in class that we still talk about to this day, 7+ years ago. And I can confidently say when I leave out of this building this evening, I will be a different version of myself, or at least attempt to be a different version of myself, be more aware of things I need to work on because of this conversation. You are truly
well, hey, then I'm blessed.
Seeds.
Right?
Yeah.
Truly planting seeds.
So his second question, did he answer your first or second question? My question is...
He actually answered both of them.
So, my question is, to me, I think I enjoy the, what's the word I'm looking for? The naivete of being 20 right now.
Yeah.
And I don't know how old you are, but even I can...
Times 2 point something.
Times 2 point something. There seems to be something that happens, of course, it's just life experience between my age and your age that may happen to me that will ruin my idealism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And you've touched on it already where you said you got to take life for what it is, right? So how, my question is, if you look at life through that lens, then how do you go about saying something needs to change and this is how you're going to do it?
Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've heard the quote that says something to the effect of the best way to predict the future is to create it. Mm. Right? So that means if you have the awareness that you have now, then you can deliberately curate your existence. Right? Because most people, you kind of just end up there and then one day you wake up like, okay, this ain't what I want. Or this is not what I thought. But you have the foresight to say, okay, wow, you know, you have more power than you think, right? Yeah. Most people live in fear, right? And it's a fear of failure. That's the, is a Marion Edelman quote about, you know, being great. And if you don't think you're great, then you deny the world all the potential or whatever. It's often attributed to Mandela, but I think it's a Marion Edelman quote about being great.
Muhammad Ali said somewhat the same as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you have the great fortune of being young and having perspective that others don't have. Some people will never get there, right? And so if you have that, then you could be, you know, you could just, you can really do important things because you got a head start on thinking about things. Yeah. And for example, you know, I was thinking about something and, you know, being blessed and something good happened. And then somewhere along the way, I said, wow, you know, that break I had was so important in my life. And then I realized if I hadn't had that break, I still would have been successful. But I didn't know that then, right? Because I was a Marine. Before I was a Marine, I had whatever that raw material is to be a Marine, which is I am never going to give up.
Right.
Period. Right? Mm-hmm. So if I struck out there, I would have been back at the plate the next day. Right? I always say, man, if you beat me, you better get a good night's sleep. Right? You know what I'm saying? Because when I wake up tomorrow, I'm going to be back on the game. Yeah. Right? And the day after that, right? You know, and when I heal, when I convalesce, I'm going to be back in the game. I ain't ever going to give up. Right? So that's the, you know, Churchill, right? Never, never give up. Right. So my point is that then I said, oh, wow. So I thought I got lucky or this person helped me or this lucky break or whatever. They realized, well, you know, I'm still me. So what else can I do? Right? So, oh man, I'm going to try something. And then you try to fail.
Try to fail.
Right? By saying, when am I going to get to my limit? Because you don't know that. Right? So it's like, okay, I need to think bigger.
Yep.
You see what I'm saying? Because I was trying to make $500 a week, man. Right? You see what I'm
saying?
Hey, Dr. Lee.
This is exactly the conversations that we have, even behind closed doors, off camera. Like, we've gotten to that point where it's like, oh, well, this was the bar. We ran through that already. So now it's like, to your point, and you're so spot on, like, there came a time economically where it was like, okay, it is about meaning. And you're spot on. It is the podcast. And you're spot on around the future is when whatever you want to create it to be. Yep. And that's what started what we have now. Yeah. Including the building that we're sitting in, including the content we're creating, including the people that we're touching. It's like, oh, like, well, we've been very resilient. So what else, to your point, what else can we do? And I think it's even fueled even more by people saying what can't be done. Like when I hear people tell me, this won't, that won't ever happen. That won't resonate with, I'm like, all right, cool. All right, well, let's find out.
To add, not just what can't be done, but also not being aware of the possibilities. Like, we have to be able to challenge yourself. I think you need to be able to grasp onto abstract ideas and make them real. Yeah. Right? So if you can't even get to the point, not only, hey, you can't do that, but I can't even fathom that even happening.
Yeah.
You have to kind of cross that barrier first before you can say you can't do it.
Yeah, but
Steve Jobs said this, right? Like he said he was sitting with his friend and he said, I'm gonna put 1,000 songs in your pocket. And his friend laughed at him.
yeah.
Fast forward to today, it's like, bro, you only got 1,000 songs in your pocket. And so to your point around the future, we get to create it. I'm at that point now. And I know he's at that same point where it's like, okay, you told me this wasn't possible. I believe that it's possible. I think these would be the side effects of creating something of this. So we're going to find out.
Well, here's my next question. I think that as he pointed out through data and research, you all, both of you, had to experience certain things in order to get to this point, right? That some people never experience in their lives.
True.
And so is what you're saying, well, my question is, I have two questions. How do we get people who would not normally reach this meaning point? How do we get them there? And is it naive of me to say we should actively try to get these people there instead of letting them cross these checkpoints or whatever?
Right. Okay, so this one's going to be an unsatisfactory answer. I'm not sure if you try to move people who don't want to be moved, which is really hard to say because not everybody's ready to be moved, right? And so, so it's going back to the coalition of the willing. You know, affect as many people as you can who want to be affected.
Yeah.
Let them worry about the next round.
That's so conflicting too, though, because the people who need help the most are the ones who never know that they need it.
I know, and there's Harriet Tubman. You know, I collect quotes, so you know I got 1,000 of them, and that's what she said. She goes, "I freed 1,000 slaves. I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew they were slaves." Right. So what I found is, for me, I know, going back to myself, good friend of mine, my third best friend, you know, he came, as a matter of fact, he came up to see me a month and a half ago because he's about to go out and be a consultant full time, right? And, you know, he came from Atlanta, so I can share with him my experiences, right? And he has always worked with troubled people. When I hired him, you know, as a security guard at the community college that I worked at in Georgia, right? He was amazing young man. He was a corrections officer, right? And then he worked with a security guard. And then he worked with kids who got kicked out of like middle school and high school. And then he does the counseling stuff. And now he works with families in trauma, you know, where drug addiction, parenting problems, foster kid, all that kind of stuff. Like he's always worked with troubled people. And I remember having this conversation with him a long time ago, which I can't do that, right? I can't, just my heart, I will be just debilitated every day, feeling that suffering and that pain. And, it just take too much out of it. I said, however, the people I work best with is people like him, diamond in the rough. So he's a security guard working on his associate's degree. He gets into our initial physical therapy assistant program at the community college. And this is like 1996 or something. You could finish that associate's degree and get a $60,000 job because the shortage of physical therapy people. We had 300 applicants. He was one of the 20 who got in. He was really, really bright. And I said to him, hey, that's cool. I didn't even know you were interested in that. He goes, hey, I'm interested in that because you make $60,000, right? And I said, you're much too bright to be somebody's assistant. Right? So he dropped out and, he's a Morehouse man today. He's amazing. You see what I'm saying? So the whole point is that he was ready. He just didn't believe. He just didn't understand who he could be. So I could work with that person, right? Now, there's some other people I've spent just as much time and effort trying to help that they didn't benefit from it because they didn't want it, didn't believe it, weren't ready for it.
Yep.
And so the question is, you only got so much time, effort, and energy. You have to decide how to do it. So for me, I'm saying go for those who are ready, who want it, who are willing to work for it, and that may be unsatisfied. But for him, he's just the opposite. He's going after people who really, really need it. So, you have to decide where your heart and where your passion lies. But for me, it's like, man, I drove down here to support you all, right? Because I believe in you and you want something. But there's some people's like, man, hold on, let me get this right. So you call me for me to help you get a job. I've helped somebody, on their career search. I'm helping a lady right now. She's a professor in New York. Her husband's here. I'm trying to help her get a professorship in this area. Every month of my career, I've helped somebody get a job, somebody's cousin, their spouse, their friend, or whatever the case may be. And so, I'm like, hey, I wrote this blog for higher ed jobs, right? I got a whole lot of articles out there. So I'm talking about something saying, then I wrote this article on this, check that out. And then somebody, oh yeah, and I wrote an article about this, check this out. Then the next meeting, we talked about, I said, can we cover that? I told you to go read. So hold on. You want me to be ready for you.
Yeah.
And you don't have the courtesy of my time I've already talked about that, right? You know what I'm saying? I've already written some science about that. And you didn't go look at it between breaks and you want me to repeat it to you now on my time that I'm volunteering to talk to you about.
I have quoted you so much.
You know what I'm saying?
You mentioned the Coalition of the Willing in grad school, and I've told my mom, this is why I'm very particular about where I pour my time into. Because there's enough willing people out there
absolutely
that are looking for people to help guide them that I'm like, okay, I can work with y'all.
Absolutely.
Even our content, like we talk about building proximity to people. There's some people right now when they see our content. We launched the first podcast on LinkedIn. Last week? Keep me honest. Last week, and we've seen over 1,600 impressions across 2 different episodes. Right? And I'm like, those are people I'm trying to connect with.
Absolutely.
They're willing. They just need somebody to help them look at it just a little differently, help guide them a little bit. The folks that are closed-minded, they're not trying to be reached. I do not have an appetite for those folks.
Yeah. And I learned that, part of that idea, doing the consulting things. One lady I was listening to, and she said, trying to sell whatever she was selling to different clients. She goes, I found out that the people who really needed my stuff, they weren't willing to pay for it, right? And he goes, and the people that I thought were advanced and, really didn't need it, they keep bringing me back, right? And I was like, that's kind of interesting, right? And that's kind of true. The people who know, value and appreciate it, the people who don't, you're trying to force it on them, they really need it. And then sometimes you give it to them free, right? It's like, and they don't value it.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, go with the, it's the Zen thing, right? Just go with the flow of the river, man. These are the people who are positive and good with it. Build from there and pick up straws and, stuff along the way. You get a, bigger thing going versus going after the, the folks who are just not ready for it. I mean, again, I know it's not nice, but I've reconciled that. It's like, I'm only going to be on the planet for a while. Right. And so I want to try to do as much positive as I can. And, there's a black hole over here in some things. Right. And I'm blessed that there are other people who believe in that. So, I mean, because, God willing, the people who help people with like subsistence and like food banks and stuff like that or whatever, and going back to the lessons you learn in life, this is family. Right. I was like, I ain't going to pay your rent. You know what I'm saying? I tell people that, nope. I come from, I will pay for your vacation before I pay for your rent. You see what I'm saying? It's like if you want a vacation, right, and you can't afford it, I'll pay for it. But I ain't paying for your rent. Because if your rent is not that important to you, can't be important to me.
Oh,
right? I mean, whatever choices you had made, right?
Yeah.
You can't cover you ain't planning and thinking for your own rent. That's a black hole, right? So this is, I learned this and that puts words to that idea. I went to one of those two-week Harvard seminars, higher education sort of thing. And the guy who is the head of the fundraising for the law school, this was like 2002, 2003. And he gave us the 16 reasons, about fundraising. That's what the session was about. And he goes, number 1 is more important than all the others, which is you got to ask for money, right? He goes, a lot of people hang out with rich people, talk to rich people, know rich people, but you got to ask. He goes, most people don't ask. That's interesting, right? So I've changed my life from that one thing. You got to ask, right? Yeah. It's mitigated by the second one. I don't remember the other 14, but the second was, right? It is better to be worthy than needy.
Ooh, that's deep.
Nobody.
Wow.
People rarely give to those who need it. So they give it to those who are worthy of it.
Got to put the work in.
So think about it. So it goes like this. Food banks, homeless, whatever. People won't give to that. But if you got a young woman or a young man who's working their butts off, trying to come up, we'll give you $50,000 for a scholarship because you're worthy. Mm. And so what he said was Harvard, I just read it last week, they're now worth like $50 billion or whatever. At the time they had $19 billion in the bank. He goes, you think that alumni would be like, you got $19 billion in the bank and you're calling me for my piddly million? Like, man, what? He goes, why do they give the money to us? He goes, because we've demonstrated that we're going to put that $1 million to good use and make a difference in something else.
Oh my goodness. So
You're conceptualizing a lot of the things that are going on in my subconscious. So I appreciate this conversation.
I read an article that said some crazy majority percentage of kids that go to Ivy Leagues and undergrad are on scholarship. It was a crazy number, like a number I would have never thought of.
The wealthiest school have those big endowments. That's what funds that. So Amherst is an example, number one or number two, however you want to rate them, top liberal arts college in the country. I think I read recently that they spend $53 million a year on student aid, right? Which proves that point, meaning that a large percentage of the students there can't afford to pay that they're given on scholarship. Yeah. And this is a school that probably has like 2,000 students. I mean, it's not a lot of students to go there. So $53 million, you can put that. They're worthy. They have bust their butt. They're smart. And people want to invest in that. But man, you got HBCUs right down the street. You got community colleges. You got all kinds of places. And people like, what's the guy who, the Harvard school is named after? I think it's maybe Chan, School of Public Health or whatever. I can't remember what it is. I think he gave him like $400 million. I mean, I'm thinking like, if you gave $400 million to pick a community college or a small school around, how much difference they could make. But they gave it to Harvard. It's like, why give them? They got billions, but they're worthy. Right?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with all kinds of charities, right? People help you start a business, help you do this, give you a loan for something or whatever. But man, we got a whole lot of poor people and people who can't eat and can't afford their rent or whatever. People spend more time because people are worthy.
I think that's so different from what I've been just trained to think, because from what you're saying, like, people should strive to be worthy rather than people who need something, right? And
do something good, people want to add fuel to it.
Well, let me ask you this. I don't know how long we've been talking. I'm in a time warp now, so I don't know how we may have been sitting here for 2 hours. Look. So I don't even know. But how I'm gonna try to ground this conversation a little bit, because I am interested in continuing to grow as a person. And I think that introspection and writing and experience and all that play a huge part. But to me, you sitting here next to me, you strike me as someone who is extremely thoughtful. And would you attribute that to one particular thing? I mean, have you talked to more people than anybody else? Have you written more than anybody else? Have you searched for quotes more than everybody else? What would you attribute that to?
Yeah. I don't know, but I like to learn. I know it's one of my things. So I read every day. And I think reading is important, research and stuff like that or whatever. Another gentleman, one of my mentees, he's up in Maine. He did a little LinkedIn thing and I actually showed that to my daughters, right? And because I thought it was pretty profound. And he said, he was holding some books and he said, the average CEO in America makes, and here's some number, like 200 times more than the lowest paid person, in their companies. It's like 243 times or something, some crazy number. And he goes, that kind of hurts my heart because of the social justice kind of part of it. He goes, but the average American reads, and he put a number like 2.3 books.
It's one. It's one. The number's one, yeah.
Right. And he goes, and the average CEO reads like
60.
40. Yeah, exactly. So he goes, when I read that statistic, he goes, I started reading. And he goes, and he says, when I started reading about relationships, my relationships improved. When I started reading about finances, my finances improved. When he said, and I remember thinking that it was like a 2-minute clip. A clip. And I said, that is just so cool, right? And so I showed it to my daughters, right? You know what I'm saying? You know, and I was like, because there's something in that. Way to make common sense practical. Yeah. So it's like, hey, you got to be learning, and the world is changing even faster. So the more you learn, the more you earn, right? You've heard that, but I think learning, and experiences, all that is a part of it. We're all a product of our experiences. Mm-hmm. So if you're thinking about, wealth, right? Health and wealth kind of, idea of, wealth being, good life. It's through some experiences, and many of the experiences come through other people, right? So we got to remember that, right? Because that's the fastest way to learn. I mean, you can read all you want, but connecting with other people who've had experiences, and so you benefit. I'm sure I said that the first day of class because I believe that, right? It's the top of my quote, and it said that I can't remember the guy's name, Talmud, from the Talmud about. I learned from my teachers. I learned a lot. From my peers, I learned even more, but I learned most from my students, right? Because you gain the experiences along the way. And it's the same thing when I was in my doctoral study. I thought the professors were like minor deities. They knew everything. And then by the time you're halfway through, you realize why. Because they got 10, 20, 30 graduate students, in classes every semester, making them smarter. Right? Because they're going to go out and read all this stuff and then come back and give you the cliff notes. You see what I'm saying?
And with questions.
Questions of what exactly. So that's part of the whole experience of the more experiences you have with others, the more you read, and if you're smart, you learn from others. Because, nobody's smarter than everybody, right? It's you learn from others, pay attention to others, gain from that. That's how you leapfrog. If you think you're going to use your abilities, I'm so great, nope, ain't going to happen. And we'd already talked about the collective action, right? The most important thing I've learned in life is a collective action. People who are successful, if you follow the breadcrumbs, there's a whole infrastructure underneath them of other smarter, better people, right? So let me give you some generic examples. Barack wouldn't be Barack without Michelle.
Facts.
Right? You know what I'm saying? And then, I've always joked like this one story about Hillary.
I tell this story.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I tell this story all the time.
Which is funny, right? So Hillary, Bill driving through,
Arkansas.
Town. You've heard that? Okay, so he's told you the story, all right?
Well, no, I've heard it online. But
you should tell the story.
Tell the story. Please tell the story.
So, they're driving a limo. They pass a guy who's, dumpster diving. And Bill says, hey, isn't that like, Paul, your ex-boyfriend? He's just like, yeah. He's like, did you ever think about if you had married him versus me, where you'd be today? She goes, yeah, I'd be the first lady of the United States.
Yes. Yeah.
Because everybody who's great, if you look at everybody's got the Batman, or the support system. Everybody, Karl Rove, if you George Bush, you know what I'm saying? Behind every person who's super successful is many other people who are equivalently successful or more, pushing them forward and supporting them, right? The myth of the one person genius is not true, right? Going back to the meritocracy, you got to have the right people. And here's a recent quote that kind of quip rather, that's kind of funny, that says, you're the sum total of your 5 closest relationships. You know what I'm saying? Which is like, oh, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, okay.
Let me check these 5.
Exactly. You know what I'm saying? Because, it's just the way it is, right? It's birds of a feather. That's all it is, right? Yeah. Or, the guy from Georgia, who came up, his mother used to say, if you hang out with 4 broke, mofos, you're bound to be 5th, right? Because that's the DNA that's going to get mixed with yours, right? And it's just other people, right? If you have positive relationships and support from other people, they bring you up. There's no other way around it because you can't bring yourself up, right? You know what I'm saying? Other people, right? That's biblical as well, right? Your gifts are going to come from, one of the pastors I had when I was in Maine, the pastor I had in Maine, rather, Bishop Coleman, a great man, he says, God is not a counterfeiter. He's not going to print you some bills, right? He ain't gonna come down there and make you whatever. It's gonna come through other people.
Yes.
Right? It's gonna come through man. It's gonna come through some relationships and something good that you've done. It just ain't gonna magically happen. Your blessings, your gifts is gonna come from the good you do interacting with other people. Right? They ain't gonna be on your own. You're incomplete. I think that's why we get coupled up, right? You know, so since I'm talking to men, it's like, I think you want to make two decisions in life. One is what you're going to do with your life and who you're going to do it with, right? And so you make a mistake here.
Yes.
Man. Ooh. You know, it's hard to recover.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's hard to recover.
The best advice I ever got, there was actually one additional point. It's what do you want to do? Who are you going to do it with? And where are you going to be? So
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Right. So relationships matter. Right. My best friend is like my consigliere. Right. I mean, you know, exactly. Yeah. Right. Right. And you know, working with my nephew, you know, I was talking with him last night, you know, and we were talking about information literacy, right? You know, so he's in Alabama. You know, we talk about vaccines, right? And I'm saying the most important thing that you're going to have to determine is what you believe, right? We're talking about information literacy, right? And I was saying, you know, it's just like what you learn in school, right? You know what I'm saying? You know, he didn't go to college, so that whole critical thinking was like, what resource or resources or sources are you deriving your knowledge from, and can you discern whether they are good, bad, or indifferent, right? And I said, for me, I'm kind of skeptical of these vaccines. I said, but I'm gonna listen to the scientists, not the politicians, right? You know, so if I'm gonna make an error, I'm gonna error from what the doctors say, right? You know what I'm saying? Like if my leg was hurting, I'm not gonna take the advice of my neighbor. I'm gonna take the advice of my doctor, right? You know what I'm saying? He could be wrong, right? But better chance I'm gonna go with this one. So that's what it's all about, right? And so then, therefore, your relationships matter. Who are you listening to every day? Because they populate your brain with certain things. And people, you know, the people who, you know, you find most successful people got other successful people around them.
Yeah.
And it's not for any magic, you know, it's because they're helping one another.
Yeah.
Right? They're helping one another come up, right?
He just came through and just OG the whole podcast.
Can you keep going? Yeah. Like, I don't want to ask no questions. Man. Pick the topic. Just keep going. Man.
Dude, Dr. Lee, again.
Dr. Lee, I'm a pup, bro. I'm a pup. I still got long way
you
to
my
go.
dog, man. But
we all are, right? You know, we all are. And that's the key, right? You got to learn. You got to grow, right?
Yeah.
You know, and then going back to the whole issue of why you're doing the podcast, once you learn, then you have an obligation, right? You know, I always say this, you know, there is a burden to know.
Yeah.
Going back to, you know, you said being young.
Yeah.
Right? So now you know.
Yeah, the curse of knowledge.
Absolutely. So then the question is, okay,
what are you going to do with it?
What you going to do with it?
Yeah.
Right? So you walk into the room and, you know, people struggling, you know, and you know, whatever. And some people don't know they're struggling. They don't know whatever, but you know that.
Yeah.
And so you can say, well, I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
But then you walk away and your heart is heavy. Like, man, I could have done something different. Right? It's a burden to know. Right? And so then I think your obligation, if you know, it's leadership and leadership responsibility. Right? In the leadership class, we talk about the fact leaders don't take charge, they take responsibility.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So then you're like, man, I got to do something with this. So then all of a sudden, you were good. You were taking care of yourself. You're good, but then other people ain't. It's a burden.
Yeah.
You know, like, I feel obligated to do something.
Yeah.
To share that knowledge, that experience, and help other people. That's a life of meaning.
Yeah.
That's a life of worth. And it's a burden. And when you like to be those happy-go-lucky people, like I'm talking to this young brother this morning, you know, my mentee, you know, going back to just, you know, giving back. Every, you know, Saturday morning, 11 a.m., for about 5 years, I've had conversations with young men, right? Sometimes there's been as many as 19 people on the line. Most Saturdays is just me and one. I'm going to be there if he's going to be there, because that's my giving back, right? So this morning, we're having this conversation about something. and about their responsibility. I said, oh, I don't know if I would do that if I were you. Because, you know, he's thinking about, you know, doing something. And I'm saying, okay, but that's being selfish. You have a family, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, you know, so, you know, you can't just go off and be a consultant or quit your job because, you know, you got the side gig who's spending a lot of money. It's like, you know, you got a family, you know, that stops. So you got to have some extra stuff, right? Because you have to provide, you have to build, you have to do whatever. So you can't just do it. And so he's like, yeah, you know, I ain't thinking about it that way. I said, well, now you know, right?
Now the burden starts.
So now the burden starts, right? Because I really want to do this little thing and whatever. Yeah, that's popular, that's great, but you got a family, right? So it ain't about you. It's about what's going to make the family better, right? That's an obligation. Every privilege has a responsibility, right? So you can't have one without the other, right? Every degree on your wall that talks about rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereunto pertaining is always that way. You have a gift. That gift comes with an obligation, right? You know anything? I mean, it's risk reward. Yeah. That's life, right? There's some positives. There's also a counterbalance to that. It's not all roses. Life is bittersweet, right? It's both, right? So if you have a gift, you have an obligation to share that gift. Simple as that.
Thank you. Seems like an understatement. But probably the best summary of how I'm feeling right now, which is just thankful.
Very thankful.
We just met.
Just thankful.
It's all good, man. It's all
Super
good.
thankful, man. Appreciate you.
Oh, yeah.
Very thankful. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
Happy to help anytime, you know. So.
And find you OGs like this, by the way.
Yeah.
The ones who go
give it to you straight.
Keep it to you straight, man. Like, oh man, that's powerful. Powerful.
It's all good.
8 years removed from school.
And still
kicking gyms.
It's still changing our lives, man. That's crazy.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Somebody's Son podcast. We encourage you to share this episode with a friend. And remember, on this path called life, you are not alone. Thank you for watching. Until next time.
She liked the way that I finessed her. She stared so long, she let me